Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our online forum, Effective Discipline Control Mechanism for Best Practices Workshop. I am Mrs. Pavitra, your moderator today, and joining me are four exceptional panelists, Mr. Veena, Miss Hiba, Puan Suraya, and Mr. Dayalan, who will be sharing our group's proposed discipline control mechanism and discussing how it can be effectively implemented in schools. When we hear the word discipline, many people immediately think about punishment. But is discipline really about punishing students? Or is there something much deeper than that? That's exactly what we will be exploring today. Let's begin our discussion. I will begin with a simple question. When people hear the phrase discipline control mechanism, it sounds pretty formal. Ms. Davina, could you please explain in simple terms what it actually means and why it matters?
Thank you, Miss Pavitra. Of course, I think the term sounds much more complicated than it actually is. In simple words, a discipline control mechanism is a step by step system that really helps teachers to handle students' misconduct in a fairly and consistency manner. Instead of reacting based on frustration or emotions, teachers follow a very clear process, understanding what happened, deciding on the most suitable response, recording the incident, and then monitoring whether the student's behavior improves or not. The reason it matters is because discipline shouldn't be just about correcting their mistakes. It should be the student's responsibility, helping them reflect on their actions and creating a safe and respectful learning environment where everyone, both the teachers and students, feels treated fairly.
Hmm. I like how you mentioned consistency. Why is consistency very important? Can teachers simply handle situations differently depending on the circumstances?
Hmm, that's a really important question because every classroom is different from one another. Of course, teachers need to consider the student's age, background, and the seriousness of the incident. However, the overall process should still remain consistent regarding anything. Imagine two students committing the same offense, but one receives only a warning while the other gets much harsher consequence without any clear reason. Naturally, the students would start questioning whether the system is fair or unfair. A structured discipline mechanism helps to avoid that such a situation. It provides clear guidelines while still giving teachers enough professional judgment to respond appropriately to individual situations. So it's really about balancing consistency with flexibility.
That's an excellent point, Ms. Davina. Would it be fair to say that discipline is about guidance rather than punishment?
Yes, definitely. I believe discipline should always have an educational purpose. Punishment alone may stop a behavior temporarily, but it doesn't necessarily help students understand why their actions were inappropriate. Our discipline mechanism encourages teachers to guide students, have a meaningful conversation with them, and also help them reflect on the consequences of their actions. The ultimate goal is to develop self discipline, personal responsibility, and a positive behavior that lasts beyond the classroom.
Thank you, Ms. Davina. Now that we have understand why this mechanism is important, let's move on to how it actually works. Ms. Hiba, could you please walk us through the main steps, please?
Miss Hiba, you are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I think that was something with my mic earlier. Okay, sure. Um, of course, I'd be glad to. Our mechanism begins with identifying the inappropriate behavior. The teacher first observes the situation very carefully before responding. The next step is immediate intervention, which may involve a verbal reminder, redirecting the student's attention, or having a private conversation. If necessary, the teacher investigates further by listening to the student's explanation and gathering information. After understanding the situation, the teacher selects an appropriate intervention based on the seriousness of the behavior. Every incident is then documented to ensure transparency and consistency.
I noticed that documentation comes after the intervention. Some teachers might think that documentation is just extra paperwork. Why is it actually important?
That's a very good question. Documentation serves several important purposes. It provides evidence if the behavior is repeated, ensures consistency among teachers, and allows school administrators to monitor behavioral patterns. It also protects both teachers and students because every disciplinary action is properly recorded.
Very interesting, Miss Hiba. What happens after that? Is the process considered complete?
Not at all. One of the strengths of our mechanism is continuous follow up. Teachers communicate with parents whenever necessary, involve counselors if additional support is needed, and continue monitoring the student's behavior. Whenever improvement is observed, positive reinforcement, such as praise, certificates, or merit points, are provided. This encourages students to maintain positive behavior.
Thank you, Miss Hiba. Let's talk something equally important now. Teachers sometimes worry about making disciplinary decisions because they are afraid of doing something wrong. May we request Puan Suraya to explain how does our discipline mechanism protects both teachers as well as students?
That's a very relevant concern. So to protect both teachers and students, we prioritize our mechanism to comply with the Public Service General Orders and the Ministry of Education circulars. These guidelines have ensured that any disciplinary actions remain consistent, transparent, professional, and appropriate, and also respectful of every student's right and dignity. For example, students are informed of school rules and its consequences and given opportunities to explain their behavior before sanctions. For teachers, they are advised to avoid favoritism and excessive punishments. Any corporal punishments must adhere to Ministry of Education circulars. By following guidelines like proper documentation of disciplinary actions, teachers are shielded from false accusations and protection from liability. Simultaneously, teachers are highly advised to focus on fair evidence-based decision-making and encouraging parent-teacher collaboration to ensure joint distribution of accountability for cases that are more on the severe side.
Besides legal compliance, what other educational ideas which support this mechanism?
So our mechanism is based on several educational approaches. Number one, positive discipline, because it encourages teachers to teach appropriate behavior rather than relying on punishment. For example, we use counseling and reflective activities. Number two is restorative practices and non-violent approach. This helps students to understand the impact of their actions, potentially repair relationships that were damaged due to arguments or any miscommunication, and restoring them through mediation sessions between peers, teachers, and parents. Thirdly, behavior management principles, because this emphasizes reinforcing positive behavior. through setting clear rules and consistent consequences, and also through behavior contracts. Lastly, we apply effective classroom management through reflective strategies like engaging lessons and ensure strong student and teacher relations. Together, these approaches help students become responsible individuals instead of simply avoiding punishments.
Puan Suraya, I really like the phrase teaching behavior instead of punishing behavior. I think that's something every educator should remember. Theory is important, but teachers often ask, how would this actually work in my classroom? Mr. Tayalan, could you share a practical example in a classroom, please?
Certainly. Let's imagine a student who is repeatedly talks during a science lesson. Okay. The teacher first needs to give a friendly verbal reminder. If this behavior continues, the teacher um, needed to be speak with the students privately, and also to understand the reasons behind of the disruption. Okay, and this incident needed to be documented, and the students needed to complete a short reflection activity. Okay, over the following weeks, the teacher needed to monitor the students' behavior and give any praises if they see that improvement on that student. Okay, this will make students feel good, because instead of feeling embarrassed or punished, right? Since as praises are being given, students will feel that they are guided, right? And encourage. This will encourage them to improve their behavior.
Mr. Tayalan, that sounds suitable for a minor issue. But what about more major, serious cases then?
Okay, let's take a case example. Two students involved in a physical fight during recess. Okay, um, first, teacher needed to separate them to ensure everyone in that environment safe. Okay, then this incident should be investigated so that the teacher could collect the statements from the both parties, and with these informations, parents should be informed, right? And both students needed to be referred to the school counselor for the further guidance, and participated in restorative discussion to resolve the conflict. The school needed to continue monitor both students in order to reduce the likelihood incident in future. Yeah, this systematic approach addresses both their behavior and underlying the causes systematically. Yeah.
Mm, Thank you. So before we conclude today's forum, I would like to propose a final reflection from each one of our panelists. We've discussed the structure, the legal consideration, and practical application of our discipline control mechanism. However, if you have had to convince a school principal to adopt this mechanism, what would be your strongest reason? So let's now begin with Miss Davina.
Thank you, Miss Pavitra. If I was speaking to a school principal, right, I would say that one of the strongest strengths of this discipline control mechanism is the consistency it brings across the entire school. When every teacher follows the same clear process, right, students will definitely know what is expected of them and trust the disciplinary decisions are fair rather than based on personal opinions or emotions. At the same time, this approach doesn't remove a teacher's professional judgment, but it also simply provides a very clear framework to make a better decision. Over time, this will build trust among students, teachers, and parents, where it can lead to reducing misunderstandings and create a school culture where the discipline is seen as a guidance rather than a punishment or a fear. In my opinion, that's the kind of positive learning environment every school should strive to achieve.
That's a valuable point, Ms. Davina. Consistency certainly helps build trust among students. Ms. Hiba, do you agree with that perspective? Or is there another strand that stands out to you?
For me, I completely agree with Ms. Davi, but I would also like to highlight that our mechanism balances discipline with student support. Instead of focusing only on consequences, it encourages teachers to identify the root cause of a student's behavior through investigation, counseling, and regular follow up. This allows students to reflect on their actions, learn from their mistakes, and develop positive behaviors rather than simply learning or simply fearing punishment. Sorry.
I like the phrase balancing discipline with support. It reminds us that education is about helping students to grow. Thank you, Ms. Hiba. Puan Suraya, from a legal and ethical perspective, what do you think makes this mechanism valuable?
So, one of the greatest strengths of this mechanism is that it ensures disciplinary actions remain professional, transparent, and legally compliant. By following the Public Service General Orders and the Ministry of Education circulars, teachers are guided to make fair decisions that respect students' rights and dignity. This not only protects students from any unfair treatment, but also give teachers greater confidence that their actions are supported by school policies and professional standards.
Thank you, Puan Suraya. That's an excellent reminder that discipline should always be carried out in a responsible manner and ethically. Finally, Mr. Dayalan, after listening to today's discussion, what do you think is the most significant impact this mechanism could have for a school community?
I believe the biggest impact is the strong collaborations among teachers, parents, counselors, and school administrators. Students' discipline should never be the responsibility of one person alone. Everyone here works together so students could receive a consistent guidance both at school and at home. This will make their behavioral improvement more sustainability. Right. In the long term, this will create a safer, more respectful, and more supportive school environment where both teachers and students can succeed.
Thank you all to our panelists for sharing such thoughtful perspectives. Today's discussion reminds us that discipline should never be viewed as punishment alone. Instead, it should be a meaningful process that teaches responsibility, encourages positive behavior, and supports students' overall development. By combining preventive strategies, appropriate interventions, legal compliance, and continuous follow up, our proposed discipline control mechanism creates a positive and supportive school environment where both teachers and students can thrive. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We now welcome any questions or comments from the audience. Thank you.